On today's show, highlights from Alperen Sengun's guest appearance on podcast P Show with Paul George, as well as Jalen Green. Why has he been so inconsistent this season? What is he doing well, and what can the Rockets build upon with him going forward? Ime Udoka's comments on energy and so much more. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
Throw it up to Jalen Green.
Sengun here in the short row. Oh, my, that's the no-look.
Jabari for three and the win. Yeah!
Look at Tari, Eason.
Here comes Tari.
No! T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
The Houston Rockets select Thompson and Cam Whitmore.
One thing I have never done is not made the playoffs, and so we want to take that step here as well.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin. The show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including YouTube. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for being an everydayer. Thank you for making the show part of your day every single day. Joining us now is none other than your weekly co-host, the X's and O's man himself, Alykhan Bijani, who you can track down on Twitter at Rockets_insider. We got a couple different topics to bring your way today. First, we're going to touch base on Alperen Sengun's little appearance on the podcast P Show with none other than Paul George. A fun little podcast. Alperen Sengun growing up before our very eyes, doing his own fully in English podcast. Nice to see there. And then also, we'll talk a little bit about Jalen Green and kind of the ups and downs in his game so far, some of the positives, some of the negatives. We'll spend a good couple segments on him, kind of what we've seen so far through just under a quarter of the season. Alykhan, what's up, man?
Hey Jackson, how are you? Good to be back. I will tell you, I haven't enjoyed watching basketball this much in a few years, and in particular Rockets basketball. I mean, like, we're just talking basketball. We're not talking moral victories. We're actually talking X's and O's and hoops, and it's really fun.
I don't know. There may have been some moral victories from that Nuggets game. I don't know. We'll see. Look, this team is beyond moral victories, and that in and of itself is a victory. The fact that this team is beyond the need for just moral victories. Let's focus here on Alperen Sengun, because he recently, if you missed it, there is a link to it in the episode description. So Alperen Sengun was on the podcast P Show with Paul George. So Jalen Green was on the same show over the offseason, and we broke down his comments when he was on the show with Paul George. And so now we'll do some of the same with Alperen Sengun, because honestly, Alykhan, I think it's really refreshing to see other players, other stars in the league start to kind of recognize Alperen Sengun and kind of give him his flowers, basically. Throughout the entire show, Paul George was very complimentary of his game, talking about just just saying that he's been one of his earliest supporters, earliest fans of Alperen Sengun, knowing that he could play, that he could ball. And then for me, as far as a couple standout moments, my personal favorite moment came as a bit of a shock when Alperen Sengun was talking about, I guess during the Clippers game, how James Harden talked to him, and James Harden told him how proud he was of him. And like that moment, Alpy talking about that, like he'll always be able to remember that moment. That moment meant so much to him. And it was in a way not like a direct passing of the torch, if you will, but obviously James is a guy who still has a lot of love for the city of Houston. He still calls this place home. He's always going to have a deep connection to the Houston Rockets, despite how he left this organization. And so seeing Alperen Sengun kind of blossom into the young star that he's turning into, it's kind of a nice moment shared between, the Rockets past and what is now the Rockets future with Alperen Sengun.
Yeah, no, I thought that was a really nice moment. For me, I really liked just how he was engaging and being very honest and just straight up with Paul about his experiences. And there was a word that he would use often when talking about this new regime, just the new structure with the coaching staff. He mentioned it multiple times with the assistant coaches and Ime Udoka. He used the word professional. He was using the word professional a lot. And I thought it was very interesting how he wasn't saying fun, even though he enjoys his time and everybody's coming to compete, but he multiple times used the word professional. And I think this is a really big thing, because I think Alp starting to realize, look, professionalism isn't just kind of what I do off the court. It's also what I do on the court, and being consistent. I mean, there was a stretch, I think over a 10-day period, I think it was like 5 games where he scored 20 plus points in each of those 5 games here in November. I mean, that's so impressive. He's playing almost 33 minutes a night on average, scoring 21 points, almost 9 rebounds. By the way, he's one of at least 4 players in the NBA, along with Luka Doncic, Joel Embiid, and Nikola Jokic, who's averaging at least 21 points, 8 rebounds, and 5 assists a game.
That's some elite company, man.
When you're in a company like that, the conversation around being an all-star isn't far-fetched. And I mean, just from those different things, just how he's carrying himself, he's really kind of putting himself in a position where he could, be that face of this team. And I think right now he is that face of this team. And if he continues this, like I said, it's not far-fetched to see if he can end up being a all-star here in the near future.
Yeah, and just a couple other little tidbits from this thing, which again, go check it out if you haven't yet. It was a really great podcast. Alp was, he's so funny and so just kind of conversational, even to the point. We have a clip here teed up just because I wanted to get to this one, where OKC was catching some strays during this interview.
Because I didn't even talk them, but they were telling me, OKC is so boring. I hope you're not going over there. And I think, when they told me you're going to Houston, I was a little happy, because
it was pretty funny, Jackson. He said I didn't want to go to OKC that much. I just thought it was
hilarious. He's out there cooking OKC, talking about just the whole pre-draft process and not knowing where he was going to go. You talked about going, he thought he was going to go top 10, and then that didn't happen. Talking about the Kings, the Wizards, and some of the other teams, and then he was like, "Oh, you're going," but he didn't work out for Houston. But I guess Houston was really interested in him, and clearly they were, and things have worked out well there. I also, at one point, Alykhan, he talked about kind of like, he used the word mental a lot, talking about like trying to describe the mentality of the team, right? So his mental, the mental of the team, of everything kind of going on in Houston now. And I really thought that was kind of illuminating, him showing that things have changed as far as his expectations and whatnot. But he also talked about his mental, right? The things that he was working on, his focus in the off season, that he had no desire to that he was, where was it? It was just outside of LA. Was it Santa Barbara that he was staying at? I think he said
Santa Barbara.
And he said he went to LA like one time and that was it, because he just wanted to be in Santa Barbara. He was just working out, strengthening his body, working on things that he needed. And so that's kind of, he's got that that mentality of basically wanting to be great. Like if you go hear the interview for yourself, you could tell this guy was so locked in this past offseason, understanding what he needed to get better at, working on things like his shot, working on his strength, working on his, on his core, all the things that he's talked about wanting to work on. And the proof is there. I mean, he's had a phenomenal season so far. He's on a all-star trajectory. And the final thing that he did, which I thought was such an interesting question, is at the very end, I guess they always tee it up right for the guest to ask Paul any questions that they have. And Alp asked actually a really insightful question, I thought, which was, how did Paul George make it back from his injury? Right? And Alp was like, they were like, God forbid this ever happens to you, or, whatever, but just in case I ever have to, be in your shoes, basically, how did you make it back? And I thought it was a really interesting question for Alp to ask. I thought it was, a great question from him.
No, I agree. He had some really, really just kind of neat insights, and it really gave you an extended look at how he views basketball, what he looks at different things. I mean, the fact that he talked about his upbringing and choosing between basketball and swimming, right? And how swimming is dear to him. There were 2 other points.
Competitive swimming is boring. So that's
competitive swimming is boring. Yeah. No, there was 2 things I really liked. I always pay attention to his post-game conversations with Nikola Jokic, because they're so wholesome. Alp will kind of be looking for Nicola a little bit, waiting for him to come over. And then Nicola and Alp will meet. And Nicola always takes his hand, pats it on Alp's chest. And to some variation, he'll say, good game, good job. Even this most recent game against Denver, you saw them kind of connect and they kind of talk. So I always enjoy kind of seeing those interactions. And then my favorite moment was when he talked about the ball. And what he talks to with the ball, like how he'll say good things or bad things depending on what's going on. And I don't know if this is true or not. I haven't had a chance to ask LP. I wonder if he's because he's from Turkey, maybe he's Muslim or not. But I always wondered if he starts with like a Muslim phrase before you start something, you'll take the name of God. So I always wondered if he's saying like Bismillah, which is basically what Muslims say when they're starting something. So I always wonder if that's what he's saying, because if you time it, that it would make sense. But anyways, I thought it was some really unique insight, and I think it makes people fall in love with Alp even more about him as a player and as a person.
Absolutely. He's a great, charismatic, amazing personality. We know that pretty well from, all the soundboard material here.
I'm so happy, like always.
he's a character, man. Go check out the show, Podcast P, the episode with Alperen Sengun. It was awesome. Link to it in the comments. Coming up, though, we're going to get into some Jalen Green discussion here. Why has Jalen been inconsistent so much this season? What are some of the areas that he can improve upon? And what are some of the areas that he is looking really good at? Because it hasn't been all bad with Jalen Green. In fact, there's been some promising stuff that he's improved on this year. We're going to get to that, as well as Ime Udoka's comments about energy concerning not just Jalen Green, but the whole team. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers are still hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins, and all you have to do is wager $5. It's that simple. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. Right now, you can take a look at the outright betting favorites for the Super Bowl this year. The Kansas City Chiefs at plus 430. Also right there in the front of the pack, the San Francisco 49ers at plus 430 as well. Right behind them, you got the Philadelphia Eagles at plus 460, the Ravens at plus 700, the Dolphins plus 900, and then just outside of the top five, you have the Dallas Cowboys at plus 950. They've also got you covered for spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started this NFL season. Again, that's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, Alykhan, we're wading into the waters here of what has been a bit of a touchy subject with Rockets fans this season, and that is the current production, play, future, whatever, of one Jalen Green. Because even you and I, before we fired up and hit the recording button, you and I had like a difference of opinions as to kind of how Jalen has looked so far this season, and while I don't want to take away the positives of what he's had, right? Because I do think we've seen some growth from him defensively. We've seen some growth in the playmaking department. He is adjusting offensively, and his role has probably changed the most of anybody else on this roster, from how he was utilized last season to how he's being utilized this year with the new coaching staff and the new approach. And I understand that it's going to take time for him to settle in, but it's also just really tough to look at this team and not think, man, they're a consistent Jalen Green away from being, 12-4 right now instead of 8-8 or whatever. They've dropped so many games because Jalen has been kind of the weak link of the starting lineup, I think, especially when you look at how impressive Alperen Sengun has been this year. Jabari Smith Jr. had a rough start to the season for those first handful of games, but if basically for the entire month of November has looked really, really good. And then Fred and Dillon have been the two veteran pickups, and they've been pretty consistent. Dillon has hit a bit of a rut over these last few games, and we'll have to save that for another episode, and hopefully it's not a continuing, a worrying trend for Dillon Brooks. But Jalen, I think, has very clearly been the weakest link of the starting five.
It's really interesting because I do feel like it all does depend on just the flow of the game. And I was just kind of doing some digging, how Jalen plays quarter by quarter. And for me, a really big stat for him is he attacking the basket? And not only is he attacking, is he finishing around the rim at a good percentage, right? In the first half, I mean, I like I said, I'm paraphrasing. I'm just getting this off of memory. He's shooting like 40-something% on 2-point field goals.
First half,
kind of the first quarter
against Denver. You mean?
No, just overall for the season.
In the first half. Okay.
The first half of games, the first half of games so far this season, he's shooting in the 40% on 2-point field goals. In the fourth quarter, for example, I just kind of pulled it up, shooting 58%. And in the third quarter, like I said, this is just for 2-point field goals. He's shooting 52%. Now, granted, still not where you want him to be. You want him to be at the high 55, high 60 percent. I mean, 2-point field goals can be mid-range and also kind of around the rim, but just you want that to be in the 50s as much as possible, right? And I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's trying to figure out how to be aggressive and how to assert himself. And I think a lot of it has to do with what is best for the Rockets offense as a whole, as a system. Does that necessarily mean what is best for Jalen Green and his offense? And I don't think both are mutually exclusive. I think both kind of work in tandem. But as of right now, just based off of how the system is in place and just what Jalen Green's current skills are, or what his strengths are. Let me use the word strengths versus skills, because he does have skills, but what his strengths are, he is somebody who needs to have the ball in his hands, and he's better as an isolation player. I mean, Jackson, just to tell you, we saw how good he was in isolation last year. He's in the 86th percentile this year, but isolation only makes up less than 9%, 8.5% of his offensive possessions, versus he spends a lot more time as a pick and roll ball handler. He's only 43%.
The Rockets are what? I assume they're like bottom 3 in the NBA in isolation possessions or something.
Exactly.
Offensively. So they're not running a lot of ISO. And this is where I think, and look, credit to Ime Udoka, who has highlighted, a few games ago, pregame, I asked him, hey, we're seeing a lot less Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun 2-man game this season, whereas that was one of the hallmarks of one of the few things that this Rockets team was good at in the past 2 years, was that blossoming 2-man game between Jalen and Alp. And Ime highlighted it, and he said, yeah, and obviously, having Fred out there, we've kind of anchored Alp to Fred, and we're running that 2-man game quite a bit. But he did say that he wants to get back to more 2-man game between Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun. And I do think over these last few games, we've seen, not the Denver game doesn't count because Fred didn't play that game, but the couple games before that one as well, we've seen a lot more 2-man game between Jalen and Alp, even when Fred is on the court. And I think that has maybe helped Jalen a little bit to feel more involved within the offense when the starters are out there. It's led to some possessions where Fred is able to be a play finisher instead of the play starter, right? He's able to get some catch and shoot opportunities at the end of a possession without having to be the guy, starting the offense. And hopefully it's something that can get Jalen in rhythm, because he very much seems like a rhythm guy, where when he doesn't have the ball in his hands, and when he's expected to just, even if he's playing through, off motion, can't talk, and coming off screens and catching the ball and trying to get downhill and, playing in space like that, it's still not the same as feeling the ball, feeling the rhythm, dribbling it a few times, getting your feet under you, crossing somebody up. There's a rhythm to the game that I think that Jalen kind of needs to feel, which is why you're seeing he kind of starts games off a little slow in the first half, and then he picks up. And usually there's a reason we feel like third quarter Jalen Green is a thing, because it is a thing. He picks it up in the third quarter usually.
Yeah, and just also let's let you know, because I'm sure our audience is curious. This is his third quarter numbers. She's shooting 45% from the field on 4 attempts per game. Almost 40% on 2.3 attempts from 3 in the third quarter. So it's pretty decent stuff, but I mean, that's where he does most of his volume, right? It feels like. But I wanted to point something out, Jackson. You mentioned the 2-man game between him and Alperen Sengun. And when Fred did not play versus Denver, he ran 7 pick and rolls. A lot of them were with Alp. They scored 14 points off those pick and roll. That's almost 2 points per possession. That's pretty impressive. Now, here's a number that's really surprising to me. This is per synergy. In the last 10 games, they've only ran 10 dribble handoffs with Jalen Green total in the last 10 games. Some games it's been a 0. they haven't ran any. Against Denver, against Dallas, they've ran one. Against Memphis, most recently in their win, they ran two. Before that, it was 2 consecutive games of 0 against the Lakers and the Warriors. So all to say is that the number of handoffs compared to last season has gone down. But what they are doing, like you said, in that concept of moving him, is that those pick and rolls, they want to get him where he's coming off the catch. So there are plays where they're running. There was a play I saw a few games ago where it was essentially Fred bringing the ball up, and then he gets the ball to LP. LP pitches it to Jalen, who comes off kind of a double drag. And what that does is gives Jalen an advantage. He can attack downhill. He can kind of set himself up, but that gets him the ball on the move where he's the most, dangerous, because he can make those decisions with his quickness. So I think Ime Udoka is slowly starting to learn what gets Jalen going. But I'm just really surprised to see the very few amount or low amount of dribble handoff possessions, considering that last year, in my opinion, the best Rockets play was that empty corner dribble handoff between Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun. They would clear the side. They would have 3 shooters on the opposite side. Alp would be at the high post, kind of towards the 3-point line. Jalen would come off and attack baseline. And that was almost unguardable because there was no help defender able to kind of come and get in Jalen's way. And he almost always got towards the rim. So that is something I'm eager to see if they come back to it at some point this season. But with the amount of time that Fred has the ball in his hands to set up the offense, set up LP on that elbow with his nice bounce passes, letting LP kind of work. How much can you put in that Jalen Sengun dribble handoff to get him going as well?
Coming up, we're going to keep the conversation focused on Jalen Green, plus Ime Udoka's comments about energy as it relates to Jalen and the Rockets as a whole. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Look, you shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to the next big event you're attending, right? You're trying to go out and have a good time. You don't want to be stressed about how you're going to get the tickets and where the seats are going to be, all that, right? Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events happening near you. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They are obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. They've got deals on tickets right up to the start of different events, and Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. They've got all-in prices, and they show you your total up front, so you don't get surprised with all like those add-in fees and hidden fees that other ticketing apps have that they spring on you at the very end. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, Alykhan, we had an interesting post-game comment from Ime Udoka regarding Jalen Green in the aftermath of the Rockets' kind of schedule loss against the Denver Nuggets, if you will. And Jonathan Fagan asked about Jalen, and this was Ime's response. Ime said, I think the second half was much better. His energy was up. I told him, bring that energy and focus from the start, not when you're only scoring. He started defending, passing better, rebounding better. I want him to be that aggressive from the start. And, this kind of matches the eye test a little bit, Alykhan. I don't know what it is about Jalen, but sometimes he has that aggressiveness, that killer mentality, that I'm the best player on the court and there's nothing you can do about it, like vibe about him. And then other times, it's like he doesn't even want to be on the court, man. Like other times it feels like he shies away from the ball. He shies away from wanting to do anything. He doesn't want to take advantage of mismatches when he's got them. He's not demanding the basketball, not demanding his reps. And I don't know where that mentality shift comes from for him, where within a given game, he just decides to like turn it on and lock in more. And I don't know if it's something that Ime needs to do better in prepping Jalen to be more aggressive from the jump. I don't know if it's a mental thing that Jalen has to work through and figure out. I don't know if they need him to get like a sports psychologist or what, but there's moments where he just looks so good and so locked in, like in the second half of the Nuggets game. And then there's moments where you're just like, why is he even on the court? Like in the first half of the Nuggets game.
Yeah, no, there was a moment a few games ago where that Tari was playing really well and that he should have closed. And the only reason he didn't close, obviously, was because of the minutes restriction or minutes limit he's on. And I thought he should have closed instead of Jalen, because I did not think at that point in time Jalen was helping them win that basketball game. And there's been moments like that, Jackson, like you said, where you want to be able to see him assert his will, even if the shot's not falling, because you know the kind of player he is and can be. One thing is, and I think Coach Udoka said it perfectly, he cannot just let his shot dictate his effort. You cannot just let your shots falling. Okay, you know what? I'm feeling good. I'm skying up for that rebound that he got against Denver, and I'm gonna, attack in transition and take advantage of that and hit a three or attack the rim. There was a play against Denver when he caught the rebound, did not get the ball up because he brought the ball up in transition, attacked, and drew a foul. And that's the kind of aggressiveness, assertiveness, just ball dominant Jalen we need to see when he's running those second unit offenses. Every game towards the end of the first or early second quarter, he has full reins to the offense. It's him and four other guys. And they're relying on him to be able to create offense. They're putting him in 1-4 flat isolation situations. He'll get a screen. You know what? I got the mismatch I wanted. It's time for me to go to work. And you have to be consistent. If the shot's not falling, that's okay. Get back. If the shot's not falling, you know what? Let me make some passes to get other things going. So I think overall, that to me is such an important line from Ime, that he told him, he shared that publicly, that I can't just have you only doing this whenever your shot's falling. You have to be able to make this consistent. Because, dude, he had a cross-court pass against Denver. When have you seen Jalen Green hit a cross-court pass? Now, still, it was with two hands. It's not with one hand like some of these elite type of ball handlers do. Like even Devin Booker has started.
So it's okay. Baby steps, Alykhan. Baby steps.
But he's doing these things. You see it. Like, that's why it's so maddening for Rockets fans. You see it. We just want to see more consistency out of it.
Pretty much. I mean, look, you hit the nail on the head there, and this has been, I've been banging this drum all season long. Is the concerning thing for me is just the lack of full understanding. It feels like that he is the guy in that second unit, right? That Ime has trusted him. He's put the onus on him to run those second units where it's Jalen out there with any combination of Aaron Holiday, Jae'Sean Tate, Tari, Eason, and Jeff Green, and maybe, maybe Jabari's plugged in there situationally, or maybe, Dillon is out there depending on his foul situation, and he's back out there with that second unit of guys. But Jalen is the offensive piece of that group. And so many times we would see offensive possessions within that group where they wouldn't be able to break down the defense, where it would end with, a rushed, bad shot attempt from a Tari Eason or a Jeff Green or an Aaron Holiday. And it's like, no, like if we're going to end with, any kind of an ill-advised shot attempt from that group, I kind of feel like it should be Jalen. Not saying like I want him out there taking a bunch of bad shots with that group, but why is the onus falling on Aaron Holiday to create like a shot with 10 seconds to go on the clock in that lineup when Jalen is out there just off on the wing or standing in the corner? That part doesn't make sense to me. And you're right, they're giving him the space. It's 1-4 flat. He's able to isolate. And I've said it for a little while now, and I would very much like to see Jabari Smith Jr. be maybe a piece of those second units where you can kind of see, and you can see Ime Udoka trusting Jabari a little bit more with that mid-range, getting him in the mid-post, allowing him to face up, kind of getting to his little bread and butter shot. And it's becoming pretty consistent for Jabari at this point. But if you're able to maybe throw Jabari out there with Jalen, maybe it won't feel like Jalen is out there on an island by himself. I don't know what it is, but we know that Jalen can beat almost anybody one-on-one when he wants to. He's got the lightning quick first step. Nobody can stay in front of him. He can,
just go back to that Clippers game. Go back to that Clippers game. He got past Paul George real quick in the half court. He can do it.
There you go. But it's so like he has a game like that, right? He has moments like that where he's getting past like an elite defender like Paul George, but then he has moments against the Mavericks where Luka is guarding him and he can't beat Luka off the dribble, or against the Nuggets where he chooses not to take advantage of the mismatch on Jokic out on the perimeter. Now, I will say on that possession that I highlighted, Jock Landale was trying to post up a smaller player. He was kind of clogging the lane a little bit, but I think if you're in that position, if you're Jalen Green in that moment, you have to know that you with Jokic guarding you on the perimeter is the better mismatch than trying to post up Jock Landale on the smaller player. You need to tell Jock, hey, get out of the way. Get out of my lane. That is my lane to get an easy bucket on Jokic. And for him to not want to take advantage of that, like that, it's those moments where the mentality, I just don't know where it is sometimes. And then not only that, right after that, right, he had the blown assignment where Christian Brown went to the other end of the court and Ime was pissed and immediately called a timeout and pulled Jock Landale and Jalen Green out of the game after that possession. Look, I don't know what the answer is for Jalen, and this is why you're right, Alykhan. It's frustrating because you see the glimpses of it, and you see the moments where he puts it together for a quarter or a half, or even there have been points where he's put it together for an entire game this season, and it looks really good. He looks almost unguardable. And then you see the games where he's not putting it together, and you're like, it's the pendulum swinging from really good to really bad that is killing this team, and he just needs to be somewhere more in the middle.
Yeah, I have a few other points I want to make, just food for thought for Rockets fans. There was a story, and I don't want to give the wrong person credit, but I remember there was a story, Jackson, before the season, and I think it was Coach Lucas said that give him one more year. He still thinks Jalen is like a year away. Do you remember this story?
Not off the top of my head. It sounds familiar, but I don't remember who would have written it. Not off the top of my head. So. If we remember who it is when we finish the show, then we'll put the link in the episode description. And we'll get it there.
I personally agreed with that statement. I think he is still one more year away. I think we're seeing things come together, but ultimately it's going to take another year for him to get comfortable in this type of system. Being around
Rockets, it's not. They can
wait. Yeah, they can wait. Yeah, of course they can wait.
Here's the problem, right? Is I guess my point is like this is the year where they decide if they're going to extend him. Like that's the problem.
I don't think you decide. I don't think you decide. I think sometimes players, especially perimeter players, and how talented they are in this league, sometimes take a little longer to develop. I think perfect example for me, just based off of speed and style of play, is De'Aaron Fox. De'Aaron Fox, you put him in a situation where he's going to win. He showed you he's going to win. De'Aaron Fox showed strides early on in his career and over time built on that. I think De'Aaron Fox to me is a great kind of example for me to look at with Jalen, because I'm not ready to give up on Jalen. Same way with Alperen Sengun. You have a guy who's pretty much become a bona fide star, and you have the ability now to wait and see. Even you have more patience than you already did with Jalen, because you want him to be able to be that secondary pairing with Alp. And also on top of that, Jabari's coming into his own. You're seeing Jabari get comfortable in that mid post, low post area. He's getting comfortable from on these wings and these corners from three. So you're seeing a guy in place at the power forward position. You're seeing a guy in place at the center position. You want a perimeter player to get going, and you're hoping it's Jalen, and you see flashes of it being Jalen. But you have to give it some time. His passing opens up everything for him, in my opinion. Once he starts passing consistently, these 3-4 person kind of helping inside the paint, those looks for him are going to go away. Because they know, hey, you know what? He can beat us with that pass. He can beat us with that skip pass to the corner. He can beat us with that skip pass to the wing. He can drop it down. He has a good one-handed pass. He has a good bullet pass. He has a good bounce pass. There's times where he's running pick and roll with Alperen Sengun. We always highlight Fred VanVleet kind of guiding Alp with the pass. I've seen Jalen do that the last handful of games, and nobody's talking about it. I'm very patient with Jalen, and you have Alp now who's become a star. You know, we were all talking about being patient with these guys. Why are we just giving up because it's, a quarter of the season in and it's been inconsistent? He's a third-year player. Great for Alp, great for the Rockets that Alp has shown that consistency. You want Jalen to get there, but let's be a little more patient. Jabari had a stretch to start the season where he wasn't playing that well, and he played well. Then he wasn't playing that well in these last 5-6 games. He's been phenomenal. This is par for the course. You have young players, 21, 20 years old, who are learning how to play the game of basketball. I mean, just a Jabari example, Jackson. For the past 6 games, he's averaging 16 points a game on 56% from the field, 40% from three. Before that, in the first 10 games of the season, he was scoring 12 points per game on only 46% and 35% from three. It happens, man. It takes time sometimes. I think for Jalen, it's clicking. I think he's just trying to figure out all that he's being assigned with. When do I be aggressive? when do I need to be passive? What is that line for me to play make versus score? And I'm not comparing him to James Harden, but James Harden with Philly, similar dilemma. When do I be aggressive when I'm playing with Joel? When do I pass? Not the best example, but I'm trying to just give an idea of the mentality that exists.
No, and first off, I think some fantastic points, and you're absolutely right. I do think that maybe the desire for this team to want to be able to win, right? Because it feels like they're so close to being a consistent winning team rather than just a 500 team, which is where they're at right now after dropping some close games and, being, and they've been in pretty much every game that they've played this season, right? They, at no point has it felt like they've gotten completely blown out. We're like, oh, it is zero contest, right? So they've been in a lot of these games. They've dropped some close ones. I think it's that feeling of they're so close, and it's just like if Jalen was just a little bit more consistent in some of those bad games that he had, then we'd be looking at some more wins. But you could also probably point the finger at Jabari in some of the earlier games this season for sure. Some of the games where Fred was a non-factor offensively, but still passing the ball well, all of that. So I think you're right. I think maybe the early success has kind of warped the maybe the expectations for this season a little bit, and we need to recheck ourselves and be like, okay, well, no, the expectations still need to be allowing these young guys time to grow and develop, and if they're able to win on top of doing that at the same time, then more power to them.
You wanted them to be competitive. You wanted them to be able to see how they look like with winning veterans and winning players and winning systems. You're seeing that, right? I've seen multiple times, and I've attended a few games at Toyota Center this season. You will see multiple times where Jeff Green will go up to Jalen and have a conversation with him about what he's seeing. He'll do the same thing with Alperen Sengun. He'll do the same thing with Jabari Smith Jr. He'll do the same thing with Tari. It's not just Ime yelling at him. They'll have other players go, Fred, Boban. There was a time where Tari committed a really bad foul against the game in New Orleans when they played New Orleans in the in-season tournament game. Boban took him to the side and had a conversation with them. You have the structure in place. Just give it time. They're playing well. I think they're going to continue to play well. And I think I'm going to be wrong about my preseason prediction of how many games they're going to win. I said they're going to win 32-35. They could potentially win more than that and be close to 40. Okay, and I'm going to say I think I will be wrong with that. But you have to also understand it's going to take some time for all this to gel. And I think especially for Jalen too, he's learning how to play those dual roles. And that to me is even more why you have to give credit to Jabari for becoming consistent. Give even more credit to Alperen Sengun for a guy who people said, hey, can he play 30, 35 plus minutes? He's showing he can play 30 to 35 minutes a game and still have this great production, efficient production with low turnovers.
And look, we're running out of time on this one, but this is the devil. I will play devil's advocate for one moment here at the very end of the podcast. I agree with everything you said. Where I take an exception to is the dual roles does not exist when he's with the bench unit. And that's what's concerning is when he's with the bench unit, it's very clear what his role is. And yet he has not fulfilled that role to this point. And that's where the Rockets have lost some of those minutes with him on the bench, with those other four, with him out there with the other bench guys. And they've not been able to produce in those minutes, which has not quite single-handedly lost them some games, but has been the deciding factor in some of the close losses that they've had because they just haven't been able to find that production when he's the one out there leading the charge. So that's the little piece that I will end this with. Alykhan, you know the drill. Let everybody know where to track you down at.
You can follow me on Twitter at Rockets_insider. And this was fun, Jackson. I love that we're talking X's and O's. We're talking actual hoops, man. This is great.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. What were your thoughts on the Alperen Sengun appearance on the Podcast P Show? Let us know your favorite moment from Al P over there, as well as your thoughts on the whole Jalen Green dilemma, debacle, debate, where Jalen is at right now in his career. Let us know your thoughts on him in the YouTube comments. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.